Hey, Brittany.
Hi, how are you?
Good, good, good. I um I I was gonna say tonight that I didn't comment on anybody's papers on God. I thought every one of them was really interesting, but that was all I was gonna say because I didn't want people to feel like I was judging anybody or commenting or but I thought everybody's papers were very, very good, very honest, and that's what.
I feel like it was really hard for me to put my thoughts onto paper. I felt like I could say a lot more and but I don't know if you're the same way, but sometimes it's hard to fully express
Oh,
what you're thinking.
absolutely. Absolutely. And that's such a hard topic, because first of all, like you might think tomorrow, you might think differently. It's not something that we uh, determine for all time. I mean, none of us are
Exactly.
theologians that we've been working on these for years and we finally come up with our masterpiece. It's like we just think about these things and once we read something and we think about it a little differently. But I do think it's helpful to put it on paper. Um,
Right.
so
Yeah, I agree. And I feel like sometimes in the same discussion, I'm changing my mind or having a different perspective.
exactly, exactly. All right. Well, let's see here. What did I do here? Hey, Michael. I was just at your university. I was,
Yeah, there was a talk.
yeah, I went to hear the talk, and
How was it?
actually, it was very interesting, very good. It was on the book of Ecclesiastes. But one of the speakers was is his son teaches at Notre Dame. Um, he's in the sociology department. Joel Middleman, the guy who spoke was Alan Middleman, who until recently, I guess, taught at the Jewish Theological Seminary. But so I was hoping to see Joel, but I didn't see him there. Um, so anyway, so I was there. I'm just laughing at myself. I'm like, we're going to talk about food tonight in Kashrut and the holiness of eating. And after I got home from the lecture, I stuffed food down my throat to have something to eat so I could come to teach. Okay. All right. There's a page. Moment. Oh, okay. Well, it is 7:30. Okay. All right. So we're gonna wait, is this one? No,
I'm going to get my coffee.
okay, sounds good. Wait, I gotta find my. Wait a minute, this is not what I want. Okay, oh, here we go. Okay. And I want to find this. Wait. Oh, let's do this first. Okay. Now let's see if I open this up with accordance. Oh, that's not the one I want. Oh. There we go. All right, great. Okay, so we are going to talk about kashrut tonight. As soon as I find my. Okay, let's see. How do I do this? I guess I need like 3 screens. Okay, so we're going to talk about kashrut tonight, and the what I do with that book. Okay, so the book that everybody should definitely acquire is, oh, that's backwards. Let's see if I can, where's the, come on.
It's actually facing our way. It says Lee's Stern.
Yeah, oh, it does? Oh, okay, maybe it's
Mhm.
backwards to me. All right, yes, How to Keep Kosher. This book is a terrific, terrific book on kashrut. And I think what I like so much about her work, and I don't know how many years old it is, what I like about her work is that she's very open-minded about and very non-judgmental about various approaches to kashrut. She talks about obviously a traditional and orthodox approaches, but also she references conservative movement decisions as well as the reform movement and why they find kashrut important. Um, and the first thing I wanted to do is to discuss to just talk about, well, we want to talk about what is kashrut and why is kashrut so important. The easiest answer is, well, God said so. It's in the Torah, but it's not so easy because all the laws of kashrut are not in the Torah. Let's see now. I want to bring up. There are a couple of places in the Torah. Wait, that's not it. Come on, man. Why is this? Oh, there we go. Okay, you should be seeing this. Yeah, okay.
Yes, we can see it.
Text chapter 11 in the book of Leviticus, which is where it comes from. Maybe we'll cancel this one and make it a little bigger. Nope, that's the wrong direction. Okay. This chapter is the kind of the classic location for the issue of kashrut, where the discussion of kashrut, in which it talks, because basically there are three factors in kashrut. And kashrut itself, the word means proper, meaning in this case, what is proper to eat. And the three basic core areas of kashrut are certain or forbidden animals, things that we're not allowed to eat, and as compared to things we are, types of animal, but certain animals we're not allowed to eat. Mixing milk and meat together, and that means cooking as well, cooking, mixing, eating. And then the meat that we do eat, at least from beef, well, I guess domestic animals, not fish, but domestic animals, have to be slaughtered in a particular way. Can't just, you can't go hunting for the animal and eat it. It's got to be slaughtered in a particular way. So those are the three areas. And the area where we talk about forbidden foods is found, at least initially, in chapter 11 of Leviticus. And this is where this is the basis for not eating pork, for example. So the first part of the list is animals, land animals, and it's so these are the creatures you may eat. It's got to have true hoofs, and the hoofs have to be cloven, and they've got to chew their cud. That's their digestive process. So then it gives us four specific examples that we don't eat. And the reason why is because these four, and what I learned, which is kind of remarkable, that these are the only four animals of all the animals that have been discovered that they're complex because they have one of these features, but not both. So there's the camel. It chews its cud, but it doesn't have hoofs. The daman, which is sometimes called a rock badger, that you find them in Israel, also chews its cud, but it doesn't have hooves. The hare, the rabbit, chews its cud, doesn't have true hooves. And then the pig does have cloven hooves. If you looked at a pig, they do have hooves. They look like the cow, but it doesn't chew its cud. And those are the only four that have one and not the other. Everything else, I guess, it doesn't have hooves and it doesn't chew its cud. So it's not a problem. But these are the four. So that's where we get the idea of no pork. Okay. That's one. Then you've got animals that live in the water, and anything that lives in the water that doesn't have fins and scales. So basically shellfish, but there are fish that don't have scales, and some we'll talk maybe a little more detail about it, but there are some fish that there's a big argument whether they do have scales, they don't have scales. But for example, the most well-known that doesn't have scales is catfish. Catfish do not have scales. They have fins, but you got to have both. So that's why no shellfish, no shrimp or pork or lobster. Okay. And then things that fly, birds, animals that fly, birds. And here we're just given a list. And by looking at the list, what's clear is these are all birds of prey. Now, later Jewish legal discussions came up with some more definitions of what birds are acceptable, like why chicken and goose and duck are okay to eat, but these animals, turkey, but these animals are not. And then they have swarming things, like basically bugs, which actually you thought, like, why would anybody want to eat a bug? But there are certain types of swarming bugs, winged bugs, that you can eat. In fact, some Jewish groups, I believe Yemenites, eat this type of locust that's found in their area, which is considered kosher. So this is the list that tells you that this is the basic list of things that are permitted, not permitted. There's another. Oh, you know what I wanted to do? Wait, there's one more list I wanted to look at. Regarding the whole issue of why can't you eat milk and meat together? Because nowhere, this is what some people get stuck on. Nowhere does it say, no, yeah, you can see this, okay. There's 3 verses in the Torah that have the exact same wording. In Exodus, in 2 passages in Exodus, and in Deuteronomy, which is a review of what we just read in chapter 11 of Leviticus. And the wording is, and you may have heard this, you shall not boil a kid in its mother's milk. Lo tevashel gedi bechalev imo, meaning in that mother's milk. So if you had a little goat, you're not allowed to slaughter that goat and then take its mother's milk and boil it in that. That's the very literal explanation. But Jewish tradition didn't take it that way. They understood, and the reason why I'm showing you this passage here, we have 3 different verses, is they have 3 different distinct, three times this strange rule comes up. Very rare that you have a rule that's exactly repeated so many times in the Torah. But what's even stranger is that the only context of food that this verse is found in is in chapter 14 of Deuteronomy, which is this repetition of the rules, the kosher animals, what animals are kosher and what are not. The context of these other verses, and I think I can do this here. Okay. Here's the one in Exodus chapter 23. Here's the context. You shall observe the feast of unleavened bread. That's Passover in the month of Aviv. The feast of the harvest. That's Sukkot. No, that's Shavuot. And the feast of the ingathering, of course, is Sukkot. 3 times a year, all your males shall appear before God. Then it has this. You shall not offer the blood of a sacrifice with anything leavened, and then the choice first fruits of your soil you shall bring to the house of the Lord. That's another mitzvah that was observed on Shavuot, where you would bring your first fruits the first gift goes to God, and then out of the blue you shall not boil a kid in its mother's milk. Nothing else about food here. Well, I mean, not you eating food. And then it goes on to a new topic. Okay, well, that was in Exodus 23. In Exodus 34, again, let's find that verse here. What did I do with the verse? Here we go. 26. Here too, 3 times a year you should appear before God, which happen to be 3 festivals. I drive out nations from your path and enlarge your territory. No one will covet your land. So it's about the land. Once again, we do have a rule about not offering leavened grain products on the altar. And again, the choice first fruits of your soil you shall bring to the house of the Lord. Don't boil a kid in its mother's milk. And then it goes on to a new topic. Only in the last one in Deuteronomy, where you have this only in Deuteronomy do you have the context of food. So you have this verse about not boiling a kid in its mother's milk 3 times, the exact same verse, and 2 of them have nothing to do with eating laws. And the rabbis determined that there was a message there, that what were we supposed to learn from this? And what they learned was that all meat cannot be cooked in with any type of milk. So there's just no milk and meat together. And that was the determination. And not only that, but there were 3 specific things that we learned that you can't do with milk and meat. You can't cook it, you can't eat it, you can't cook it, and actually you can't profit from it. So when I was learning this stuff, the teacher said, you can actually go work at, I don't know if they have such places, but like Bob's Bacon House. A Jewish person could go work at, Bacon McDonald's, where they only serve bacon, and that would be okay. Can't eat it, but you can profit from it. You can work there and make a living by working at Bob's Bacon House. But you can't work at McDonald's because McDonald's makes cheeseburgers. So you can't profit from that, from milk and meat together. So that's the second rule. So we saw that in the Torah, there are certain rules about what you can and can't eat. It outlines a basic outline for us. Here we have these 3 strange verses that talk about this strange practice of boiling a kid in its own mother's milk, and from that they extrapolated no milk, and you can't cook any meat or eat or benefit from any meat which is mixed with dairy. And then the third one, it has to do with the proper slaughter, which also, I don't have verses for that, but basically comes from the rule about not eating the blood. Already in the time of Noah, in the verses of Noah, we're taught that Noah's commanded not to eat the blood of animals. And later, when it comes to human eating, you have to drain all the blood out of the animal, because God says blood is the life of the animal, and we human beings have no right to that. And that's sacred. That's sacred to God. Life is sacred to God, and so we don't have the right to eat any of the blood. Now, of course, if you're eating meat, it's completely impossible to get all the blood out. But as we'll talk about with Kashrut, there were great attempts made to remove all of the blood as much as possible before eating meat. So those are the 3 basic rubrics of Kashrut. Then, of course, as Jewish law develops, they go on, and many more rules are developed, and we'll talk about that. But tonight I wanted to focus exclusively on, like, why is this so important, and why all these rules? And so many people have striven to make sense of these kosher rules. And a lot of anthropologists have worked very hard to come up with understanding of it. So the famous sociologist Mary, his name will come to me, of course, tomorrow. Um, she wrote about how it was that there were certain categories of animals, um, land animals, um, fish animals, flying animals, and these animals, the what's the word I'm looking for? The typology of a land animal is this, and anything outside that typology is not acceptable. So it was about categories of animals, and other people said it had to do with locomotion. Um, that it's how did the animal move? If it moved in a way that seemed, in some ways, too close to human, then we don't eat it. So a lot of different attempts anthropologically to come to some understanding of how of why these animals and not others. Yeah, Michael?
Well, I'd be curious to know what they came up with. My question is, in terms of things that you should not do, should not eat. Um, and I don't know if you can answer this. Does this indicate that they were actually doing all of this stuff, boiling the, kid in the mother's milk and doing all this other stuff? Now all of a sudden you can't do that anymore, or was it already sort of the practice to?
Well, that's a good question. I don't know enough about ancient Canaanite practices, let's say, but I'm guessing that there were cultures of that time where they did boil. They would cook the meat of the animal in either its own mother's milk or certainly in milk. And there's a sense that, I mean, we can talk about, we're going to talk about in a moment, spiritual explanations. Some people give that, milk is connected to life and to mothers giving life to their children. And so therefore, milk is a life-giving substance. And flesh obviously represents death, because to eat the flesh, you've got to kill the animal. So it's not appropriate to mix these two things, life and death. Okay, that's one possibility. There are what I wanted to bring up 14. Let me bring up the screen again.
Well, it just seems to me
Yeah.
it's also a way of saying we're not like these other people.
Oh,
That's what they do.
I'm sure that that's a lot of it too. One of the oh wait, here. One of the other things that they people have pointed out was this is logical. If you're if camels are your source of traveling in the desert, you're not going to eat it. It's kind of dumb.
That was my favorite.
Yeah.
I can't eat my camel.
So, in my mother's theory, because I didn't grow up in a kosher home, my mother's theory was, which I'm sure many people shared, rationalist, we tried to rationalize. Well, you didn't have refrigeration in those days. So how could you, trichinosis, you get trichinosis, and Jews are just smart enough. I guess the other Canaanites weren't that smart, but Jews were smart enough to know that if you ate that you didn't have a refrigeration for your pork, you'd get trichinosis, and so Jews are smarter than the average bear. Well, okay, then I would ask my mother, well, wait a minute, if they didn't have refrigeration for pork, how'd they eat beef? They didn't have refrigeration for that either. Can't you get sick by eating non-refrigerated beef? Okay, so she didn't have an answer for that one. So, these were all attempts to rationalize what is clearly or in many cases seems to be irrational things. I mean, you can make a nice drash about not, milk is life-giving and meat is the flesh is the dead, and you don't mix it. But but truth is, well, why can't you cook that? Maybe I will say this: there are a number of rules. There's another rule in the Torah in which you cannot slaughter the baby calf on the same day as the mother. That is, you can't, and you have to allow the baby calf to at least to be 8 days with with the mother. Now you say, well, if you're going to slaughter either one, what's the point? But there's a sensitivity there, it seems, in Torah verses to mother-child relationships, which of course is a reflection of our own sympathies. But so maybe that's partly it. But certainly, if it's not the mother's own milk, if it's a milk from another animal, what's the big deal? I mean, it's an irrational rule. Yeah. Ellen or Sylvia?
Yeah, that was me, Sylvia. Just thinking another dimension, at least to some of these rules that I don't often hear discussed, but I've heard it talked about sometimes, is it's always seemed to me, at least if you're talking about like which animals you eat, like, beef and lamb is okay, but pork isn't. It's not just about, the meat itself. These rules were probably initially codified at a time when you weren't just, buying it from a market. It's partially what kind of people are we, and it's partially it seems to be a statement that Jews should be shepherds and cowherds, not pig raisers.
Yeah, could be.
And I'm not an expert, but I think raising cows and sheep is a very different type of practice than raising pigs. So there's got to be some elements like that in there too.
That could be. I mean, there's there are all of these possible explanations. They're all attempts to find some kind of rationality to this, which is fine. But ultimately, here I'm showing you on Deuteronomy 14. This is the review of of chapter 11 in Leviticus, and you see here from this introduction to these food rules is it has a very different approach. Now it starts off with a rule that has nothing to do about food. You are the children of the Lord your God. You shall not gash yourselves or shave the front of your heads because of the dead. This is obviously a practice of the people around them. For you are a people consecrated to the Lord your God. The Hebrew here is ki am kadosh ata. Let's see what the KJV, the King James version. You are a holy people. The Lord your God chose you from among all other peoples on earth to be his treasured people. And therefore you shall not eat anything abhorrent. So the Torah itself seems to understand these rules beyond whatever the original rationale was for it, it has something to do with holiness. That holy people have to eat in a particular and a certain way. And with that in mind, I wanted to just, in the book, in this How to Keep Kosher, the introduction, she asks a bunch of people that she knows why they keep kosher. And I just wanted to go through some of the explanations here that people gave. Glasses. Okay. So one rabbi who's clearly Orthodox, he's not only Orthodox, he's Lubavitch, Rabbi Benjamin Simpson says, kind of the basic explanation. Kosher is fundamental part of Judaism. I keep kosher because that is what God wants. It's one of the mitzvot in the Torah. That's what we do. So that's the easiest explanation. Well, why should we follow these rules? Well, because God said so. Okay. But for many people, that is not enough of an answer, although it's certainly a good answer. But she said she has a friend of hers who grew up Orthodox, but left Orthodoxy and became a conservative Jew. She said keeping kosher was always a given for her. To me, it's about mindfulness, taking something that's very mundane but integral to my day and making it holy. And I think that is one of the key elements of kashrut, at least because eating is one of the basic things we do every day. And it's one of the most mundane things. And if you can invest mundaneness, is that the noun? Mundaneness with transcendence, something holy, then that's really very, very special. It allows you to have transcendent moments at various points of the day. Now, you can do that in lots of different ways. Saying a bracha before we eat something is one way. We invoke God's presence, but also following these specific eating rules. A friend of mine, David Starr, was quoted in the book as saying, I think becoming kosher is a wonderful step in terms of people's evolution Jewishly. He didn't grow up kosher, but as I was looking to grow Jewishly, I think I felt a sense that kashrut was a core practice. The notion of, hey, you are what you eat. It's an incredibly basic marker of daily identity. I wanted to do something that was going to make me feel Jewish in a deep, palpable way. So this is another element to it. It's not only having this transcendent moment and bringing transcendence into what is mundane, but it's like a Jewish people thing. So that's what Jewish people do, and it distinguishes you, and that's important for some. A Reform rabbi, Victor Reinstein, said that it was kashrut that led him to vegetarianism, which maybe is, in some sense, it's kind of, I wouldn't say it's what led me to being a vegetarian, but having the discipline of a kosher diet did allow me more easily to accept the discipline of a vegetarian diet. So he says, as a discipline, kashrut creates a framework of acknowledging the holiness of all facets of life. To me, a major part of kashrut is a spiritual discipline that helps create a reverence for life. I really felt a sense of trying to feel and express and honor a harmony of life forms, feeling that being a vegetarian was a reminder of living with a greater sense of reverence for life. And the last one I'll give you is, since we want to give all types of Jews opportunities, here is Rabbi Shon Zevet, who is a Reconstructionist rabbi, and I think it's a he, says, kashrut creates distinctions. The rabbis built on the idea of separation, pure and impure, clean and unclean. Contemporarily, that can mean taking into ethical and ecological categories. What does kashrut ask us to pay attention to? The conduct that comes out from us, the food that we bring into us becomes who we are. The actions we do define who we are in the world. And I think that's really important too, because many of the mitzvot, at least speaking personally, many of the mitzvot for me give me a clear picture of living with a perception of rights and wrongs, that there are certain things you do, certain things you don't do. And while it's not morality, I mean, plenty of wonderful human beings eat bacon, eat cheeseburgers, but I think living a life in which you're able to make distinctions and you recognize that there are distinctions of proper behavior, improper behavior, help us be able, hopefully a little easier, okay, I'm being a little naive here, but a little easier at making distinctions between right and wrong. As I'm saying this, I'm thinking about the atrocious behavior of what was once, maybe it still is, but they have different ownership, thank God. What was once the largest kosher, beef, kosher meat packing facility in the country. It was in Iowa, of all places. It was owned by a Chabad family, a Lubavitcher family, and they were horrible people. I mean, they exploited their workers. They treated the animals horribly, and so as I'm saying that, it helps you be able to make distinctions on the moral level. Obviously, that wasn't true with the people who ran this kosher meatpacking plant. But one hopes, one can hope. Okay. So the point I wanted to make though was just that kashrut, there's many different explanations for it. But one of the explanations that the Torah itself gives us is that eating this diet is about holiness. So we can come up with all types of rational explanations, like some of these people did, right? It gives you discipline, but ultimately it's about holiness. At least from that's what Judaism is telling us. The Jewish texts are telling us. All right, so now let me find my thing here. Okay. And this is also important, at least in terms of conservative movement rules about kashrut. So we talked about, it's make us whole. We understand that kashrut is a holy way of living. That's what we're being told in the Torah. When we eat this way, it establishes a relationship with God. That's why I tell people when they're starting out to keep kosher, first of all, don't try to do it all at once. It'll be overwhelming, and then you're going to get crazy, and then you're going to say, it's not worth it. You do it slowly. You do it in little pieces, and I'll say even when you go to a restaurant, there's a big issue, and she talks about it in the book, keeping kosher in and out, meaning keeping a kosher home. We'll get into that later in the third class on kashrut, keeping a kosher home, but then people will go out and eat non-kosher food in a restaurant because there aren't that many kosher restaurants, certainly in South Bend, and you want to go out to eat. So what do? And I'll always say that to people, I'll tell people that I think it's important to make decisions and distinctions. So if you go to a restaurant and you say, I'm not going to order the steak, even though I eat meat and I like steak, I'm not going to eat steak in this restaurant because it's not kosher meat. But I'm going to have pasta, or maybe fish is a little bit less problematic than meat because you don't have to worry about koshering the fish, or I'll have fish, or I'll have some other food there, a dairy dish of some kind. But I'm eating that because that's less problematic. That's already making a distinction. That's an important step in. And why am I doing this? Why am I not eating the steak, which looks so good at this restaurant? Because of my commitment to kashrut, because I believe that God expects me to eat certain foods, because it connects, because that's what Jews do. Now, I do want to say about that's what Jews do, is that's the reason why the conservative movement disavows certain laws of kashrut that deal with impurity of non-Jewish people touching the food or making the food. There is, and it's even because, of course, we always have to become more and more extreme. There are rules on the books, which I think probably 80 years ago wasn't such a big deal. Now, of course, it's a very big deal in the Orthodox world, that certain types of food have to be cooked by Jewish people. Wine is probably the one that's most recognized, because if you ever go to a kosher restaurant and you ordered wine, obviously kosher restaurants, they hire waiters and waitresses. They don't distinguish between Jewish and non-Jewish waiters. They hire non-Jewish waiters too. But you'll order wine, and the waiter who you're working with will call over maybe either a Jewish waiter, or they'll call over the mashgiach who's overseeing the kitchen, and they'll pour the wine for you. Why? Because according to rules on the books from the medieval period, Jews aren't supposed to drink non-kosher wine, and that means like nothing, not only the preparation of the wine, but even as much as pouring the wine has to be done by a Jewish person. So the conservative movement has disavowed all of these kind of rules. says that's ridiculous. We live in a world where we're not worried the non-Jewish person is going to slip in some wine that they poured a libation to their gods. That we don't worry about those things. And one of the other reasons for those rules is non-socializing, so as not to socialize with Gentiles. Although somehow I never understood why you can drink whiskey with them. You're just not supposed to drink wine with them. But okay. But well, we don't live in a world where we don't socialize with Gentiles, so that's not real for us anymore. So the conservative movement did away with any kind of limitations of eating if the rule is Gentiles, that only Jews can prepare the food. So that's part of conservative. That's a distinction between conservative kosher rules and I have to say probably mainstream Orthodox rules today. I'm guessing it wasn't that way, as I said, 50 years ago, but it is that way today. Okay, so the next thing I want to do, so those are reasons for kashrut. So that's one element of to think about with kashrut. I want to go over some specifics now with food. Is that what I want to do? Okay, I guess that is what I want to do. Okay. So we talked about the forbidden foods a little bit, which come to us from the chapter 11 in Leviticus, and we talked a little bit about mixing, what no mixing means. There's three areas. Again, not eating it, not cooking it, and not benefiting from it. We should talk about some definitions of food, I guess. I mean, some definitions that you'll want to know about. And I'll send this list out because there's key words. So the first one is, of course, the word kasher, which I said means fit. Sometimes kasher it's not only used in food or regarding food. It can be anything, it can be behavior. It's not kosher because it's not appropriate. But that's what kasher means, although it usually refers to food. Another term you'll hear a lot is treif. Now, treif has a very specific meaning in the Torah. Treif means to tear. So treif is an animal that has not been slaughtered, is not kosher slaughtered. But I mean, in the Torah itself, it's been like attacked by another animal or anything that's been torn. You can't eat that. But it's come to mean anything that's not kosher. So even if it doesn't have to do with meat, treif just becomes kind of this all-inclusive term for something that isn't kosher. The term for dairy foods is sometimes you'll hear milchik. Something is milchik. Well, obviously it sounds like milk. That's just a Yiddish form. The Yiddish for dairy is milchik. In Hebrew, you'll hear chalavi. Chalav is milk in Hebrew. So chalavi is something that's dairy. Milchik, again, is the more common term you hear in the States only because it's Yiddish. And so many Jews from Europe came over and Yiddish was the typical language. Likewise, regarding meat. So meat, the term that you'll hear in Yiddish and the common term is fleshig. It comes obviously from the word from flesh. Fleshig is, again, the Yiddish term for meat. Bisari, basar is meat in Hebrew. So in a Hebrew context, it's bisari. And then we have this concept known as parav. Parav means basically neutral. It's something that's not meat and it's not dairy, which actually is a lot of foods, maybe most foods. So vegetables, parav. Fruit, parav. Fish is parav. Fish is because fish is, while it does have blood, fish does have blood, it doesn't well, certainly it doesn't feed its young through milk, But then you'll ask me, well, what about chicken? Chickens don't either. So chickens became a big issue in the Talmudic discussion on this topic. Are chickens parv? Because they're not like beef, they're not like cows or goats. They don't feed their offspring by lactation. On the other hand, the general understanding was if you cook chicken and you cook meat of some kind, especially, I guess, probably more like maybe goat meat or something, it's not as easy to tell the difference between those cooked foods. And even today, even if not having any knowledge of kashrut, people think of chicken as a meat, whereas I don't think most people think of fish as meat. So chicken by rabbinic rule followed under the rubric of meat animals, domestic cattle, or trying to think of the term that I want. Okay, well, you get what I'm talking about. But fish isn't. Fish doesn't come under that category. So fish is parov. Fish can be, and the key thing about parov means, since it's neither milk nor meat, a person cooking that food, you can cook vegetables and have them in a dairy meal, and you can cook vegetables or fruit with your meat meal. So parv works either way, and that's what I mean. It's I don't really know the origin of the word parv, but it means neutral, and parv works in either Hebrew or Yiddish. All right, so let's go through. Now we talk about things you can't eat. Let's talk about things you can eat.
Oh, hey, Rabbi.
Yeah.
What about eggs? Are eggs considered meat?
No, good question. Eggs are also parv. Eggs, as long as they come from a kosher fowl. Obviously, chicken eggs, goose eggs, duck eggs, those are considered parv, and you can cook again. Put eggs into a dairy dish and cook it. You can put what some people put on. That's the new thing, right? Is you get like a egg on your hamburger or something. You can do that too. So eggs are okay. We'll talk. There's a little thing I wanted to mention about eggs in a moment, but so what can you eat? Well, all vegetables, all fresh fruits. That's good. Now, because I believe in sharing as much information as possible, even if it's a little crazy, there is a concern in the modern world with bug infestation of vegetables. Ironically, this was not an issue a generation ago, but now it is, because farmers don't use DDT anymore. You would think that's a great thing. Well, according to some people with kashrut, it's not a good thing because it doesn't kill all the bugs. Can't kill all the bugs, which is a good thing because DDT also kills lots of other things. But since there's been a pullback of some of the more powerful and dangerous chemicals, there's grown a concern about bug infestation on fruits and vegetables. So when one is making a salad or getting vegetables, you're supposed to check for bugs. It gets a little crazy because many of these bugs you can't even see with the human eye. But again, it doesn't stop some in the more extreme Jewish world from outlawing these things. You will never get served broccoli, which maybe some people are happy about. You'll never be served broccoli in an Orthodox or a very far right Orthodox home, or Brussels sprouts or anything like that because they don't trust that they can find the bugs. It's too hard. Um, but in general, I mean, my theory about this is, and sometimes if if I'm really feeling very what's the word I'm looking for? Not officious, but strict. I will take the broccoli or the Brussels sprouts or whatever the vegetable is and put it in a bowl with salt water. If any bugs come out, because they're going to be agitated by the salt water, then I know not to eat it, throw the vegetables out. I have to admit, I've never found it. Whenever I've been in this mood, I do it. I never see a bug come out. Sometimes I'll put it in vinegar. Bugs don't come out. So my assumption is that they're not there. Um, so I just mentioned that's sometimes you'll hear that. You'll hear people won't eat certain vegetables. It's not because of the kashrut. It's not because there's something wrong with the vegetable. It's that they're concerned that they can't find bugs on the you're not and bugs are not kosher and you can't eat the bugs, so therefore they won't eat it. But all I'm saying is it's just something to be aware of. If somebody says, "Oh, how could you eat broccoli?" You'll say, "Well, I checked for the bugs." Frozen. Oh yeah. Okay. Questions about bugs, Michael?
Yeah.
Well, it wasn't so
Is
much a
there
question.
a
Oh, hold on, Sylvia. First, Michael.
It made me think of people who, not necessarily Jewish, maybe not Jewish at all, who are vegans.
Yeah.
Vegans, just be vegetarian. Wouldn't you avoid all of this stuff?
Oh.
Is there a position on being a vegan in Orthodox or conservative Judaism?
Oh, yeah, yeah. No, I mean, if you're vegan, man, you never have to worry because you don't eat milk and you don't eat and meat. So you can eat anything. Um, so yes, that's the easiest way to,
Okay.
but yeah. So and Sylvia?
This was a question about the bugs, not to challenge it, but just wondering for information.
Uh-huh.
Is there a discussion is there a Talmudic discussion about checking vegetables for bugs? Is that how far back does that go?
Um, oh, well, it goes back. I mean, the Talmud talks about this, where about not eating bugs if it's and if memory serves, talks about is it a partial bug, a whole bug? So they talk about, they knew about this concern. It's that today, like when you buy vegetables well, maybe if you buy it in an open air market, I can't say, but if you go to any grocery store that that's getting bug, they're pretty sure, you're pretty sure that they're not, these the big bugs that you see with your eyes, they're not going to be selling it because they're not going to get a lot of customers if they are selling vegetables that have bugs crawling all over them. So we're talking about the element that's become so extreme is the insistence that there are tiny little bugs that you can't really see unless you have a magnifying glass or a microscope. And at that point, it's like, oh, wait a minute. I'm sure throughout Jewish history, people have, when they talk about bugs, they're talking about things you see and that you might be eating. But if you can't see the teeny weeny little bugs, then what are you worried about? I mean, there's a lot more things we should be worried about, I think, with our food than microscopic bugs. But this is where it's gotten, is that because there is a possibility of these tiny, tiny little bugs that you really need a device to see, so that's possibly there, so therefore we can't trust the food. So I mean, to me, that's a little crazy, but I just mention it because I do want you guys to be aware of some of these rules. Even, I'm not saying you have to follow them, I'm just saying that be aware of them, because if somebody says like, "Oh, how can you eat broccoli?" you'd be like, what's the problem with broccoli? Well, they're talking about the bugs. It's not only broccoli, it's like also, I guess, raspberries, blackberry, anything that's really tiny, has these little tiny, I don't know what you call the little pieces on the raspberry, the little berry parts. But any of these, yes, there might be bugs. So you know what? Don't, if you really want to be strict, I guess, don't go picking in a blackberry bush or a wild raspberry bush. But I I really don't think that most grocery stores that are selling you fresh produce are not also thinking about this. Has nothing to do with kashrut. It has to do with they want their customers to come back. But okay, that's me. Now, um, frozen vegetables, interestingly enough, no problem. Um, that's fine. The only issue, and we'll get to this at Passover time, there is a little bit of an issue with buying some um, uh, frozen vegetables at Passover time, only because, and we'll talk about this when we get to Passover, the rules about chametz and very, very tiny infinitesimal amounts of leaven products getting onto any kind of food, that's also a modern problem because now, like you go in the frozen food aisle and all of these big producers of frozen vegetables, like what's a Green Goblin, right? Green Giant. Green Giant, they produce now not just plain frozen broccoli, but now they have like, Asian broccoli stew or whatever the dishes are that they put together, or, these fancy frozen dishes that may have um, uh, dough as part of it, as part of the process. And in that case, when you comes to Passover time, you're not sure were they making the plain frozen broccoli on the same line as the fancier food that might have dough on it. So, but we'll get to that. For the most part, for the most of the year, frozen frozen fruits and vegetables are fine. Grains that are unprocessed, well, depending on how they're processed too, um, are often are fine. Any kind of grain. There's no restrictions on grain. Oh, that's another part of food. Yeah, Michael. Oh, you gotta unmute.
This has to do with the airlines. It used to be, I mean, maybe it still is, if you were taking, say, a long flight, Chicago to London or something like that, airlines would allow you to put in a request that the food that
Yeah,
they serve on the plane would be kosher.
yeah,
How is that gone? Is that acceptable? They still do that?
yeah. They do. What they do is it's a kosher food outlet that makes the food, and then what they'll do is we'll talk about this when we get to cooking. They double wrap the food. So once the food is like this double wrapping cover, you can actually stick it into an oven with non-kosher food because it's
Oh,
considered the double wrap is protective. So yeah, that's how they do it.
okay. Thanks.
All right. So oh, let's make a little comment about cheese. All right, so cheese is another one of these foods like wine that, and there's a big debate in the conservative movement about it. Because on the one hand, what's the big deal about cheese? It's all unless you're putting some kind of flavoring in it that it wouldn't be kosher. But in general, plain cheese, cheddar cheese, Swiss cheese, mozzarella cheese, there's no problem with it. The issue, though, is the rennet. Rennet is what is the product that causes the milk to turn into cheese. It's the enzyme. Originally, the rennet came from the stomach of the cow. So that's a problem with, then the question is, well, are you mixing milk and meat? Now, the conservative movement determined that the rennet is not problematic because you're actually using it, the chemical enzyme. You're not like scooping the cow. I mean, that's actually how they used to do it. You're not putting the milk in a cow's stomach and then, waiting it for ferment and turn into cheese. You're you're taking the chemical compound, and so it's considered a new product. That rennet is considered a new product. Somebody also just told me that most rennet today is not it's not animal based anyway. Um, but some people are concerned. Okay, so there's two. So in the Orthodox, the more strict approach is that rennet is one of those things when making cheese. This is another one of those foods that Jews have to be involved in the entire project. So you have to pour. So the Jewish person has to pour the rennet in, assuming it's kosher rennet. They have to pour the rennet in. Um, and when I lived in Appleton, Wisconsin, where there were a lot of dairy farms, you would run into these very strict Orthodox people who did not live in Appleton, but they would come and live for a certain amount of time at the dairy farm. And they would, when they would make the cheese that was considered to be kosher, they would do like a week of making kosher cheese. And all that meant was that the mashgiach, the overseer, would make sure that he was the one pouring the rennet in. Okay. So that's one. Most of the conservative movement, again, doesn't disavows that concern. The issue, though, is what's going into the cheese? You don't really know unless you have somebody overseeing the cheese making process. There might be some things that are a little, that they're putting something in. So some people a little more are stricter about cheese. We're even having a debate at the synagogue whether now there's talk of the two congregations working with each other. I've always taken the stricter view just so that anybody should feel comfortable with eating, that we always get kosher cheese at the synagogue. But, I've said that if the two synagogues are going to work together and the reform movement is kind of wary about too many kosher rules, I was like, okay, we'll just be lenient on cheese. You don't have to worry as long as there's no flavorings. There's a lot of things they put in cheese, but if it's just plain cheese, cheddar, Swiss, Gouda, whatever type of cheese it is, we don't have to worry about that. But so there's a little bit of a debate on cheese, and she talks about that in the book. Okay, so Paige, you asked about eggs. The only issue with eggs is people will check for blood spots. Why? Well, because if you're buying eggs from an organic farm where the male chickens and the female chickens are running around together, you never know if something happened. And maybe if you open up the egg and there's a little blood spot, is that has the egg been fertilized? In which case, you would be eating potentially, a fertilized egg would be considered unacceptable. So but most eggs, even if you find something, if you were to crack, so what some people do is before they cook the egg, they crack it open and they look to see in the yolk if there's any blood spots. But the reality is that most egg producers, even organic egg producers today, keep the chickens apart, the men and the women apart from each other. And so if you do see a red spot on the yolk, it is highly unlikely that it is a fertilization. It's more like it may have been that the chicken itself might have hemorrhaged a little bit. So in that case, you may want to just scoop the little blood part because you're not supposed to eat blood. So you just want to cut the blood part out. But that's what some people do. They'll check eggs for blood spots because, again, before the industrialization of food, it could have been a little potential chicken in that egg. But now we don't. For the most part, it's not a problem. Although I will say that and we only buy cage-free eggs, which I hope are more um, ethically raised than the regular standard egg because they treat chickens so horribly. So I'm hoping he gets hope when I buy cage free that it's more ethical. I have to admit I do find that more often there is a little spot on the yolk in the organic and cage free eggs than if you buy um, just regular white eggs. Yeah, Paige.
Trying to find the mute button. I was wondering if there are such well, like kosher grocery stores that are affordable, because it sounds like a lot of the food is of high quality, but when it comes to quality, things are a lot more expensive. Like I'm thinking Whole Foods version, but completely kosher.
Oh, yeah. Well, that is a big complaint about kosher foods. Um, Now, the explanation is, well, they've got more people looking at it, and it's a more involved process. But it doesn't really. The truth of the matter is that there are so many things you can get at the store these days that have a hechsher, which we'll get to next week, um, that have hechshers on them, which is just a sign that there was some rabbinic organization that went through and made sure that this food follows kosher norms. Um, that it's just ridiculous to pay more money at a purely kosher grocery store. But there are some things that you would want at a kosher grocery store. The meat is going to be more kosher meat is always going to be more expensive because if it is ethically produced, even if it's not ethically produced, I suppose there's just more involved with it. Um, the kosher meat, like let's say a beef, whether it's any kind of, it could be sheep, I mean, it could be lamb, it could be beef from a cow. Um, they have to slaughter it. There's no industrialized method really for slaughtering these animals. The slaughtering method requires them to cut the animal's jugular vein in one blow and kill it instantly. That's the idea. That's why it's supposed to be more ethical, where you're not torturing the animal. You're just killing it instantly by cutting the jugular. Um, but then they have to check to make sure that there's no um, what's the word I'm looking for? There's no deficiencies in the animal itself. Like what I said before about trafe is become this general term for food for meat that is not kosher slaughtered. It's also understood for an animal that might have a defect that would cause it to die. So if they slaughter the animal by kosher methods, then they have to go, they start taking the animal apart. If they find that some of its organs are in some way diseased or defective, then you can't use that animal. So, and we'll, not all of the beef animals can be used anyway because of another rule that comes from a story in the Torah about Jacob fighting with the angel and and being wounded. So that come on, that not the vein, that muscle, which will come to me. That muscle, we don't eat that muscle. It's too hard to remove that muscle from a cow, for example. That's why you'll never find sirloin steak on a kosher menu, because it's the latter half of a cow can't be used for kosher meat. So the slaughtering is more involved. You can't use the entire cow, or at least for the kosher consumer, they sell it to non-kosher. But so the kosher producer is only using a portion of the cow and he can't even be sure that every cow or goat that he's slaughtering is going to be usable. So that's why kosher meat is always going to be more expensive. Um, uh, and um, and then of course it's the fact that there aren't that many kosher consumers. There's a lot more. I mean, it's funny. There's a lot more kosher consumers than Jewish people who keep kosher, because a lot of people who aren't Jewish or think that or have the assumption that kosher food is healthier for you. It's not. But some people like the idea, well, somebody else, it's not just the FDA, but also some rabbi is checking out to make sure that the food isn't is acceptable to eat. So so the irony is there aren't a lot of kosher consumers in this country, kosher Jewish consumers, although there are a lot of people who buy kosher food specifically, but still there aren't that many. So anytime and now Jewish eaters, Jewish consumers have been exposed to so many things. Maybe some people weren't kosher when they were younger. Now they're looking for um, foods that they used to be able to eat, but in a kosher version. There are people who grew up kosher, but would love to try these worldwide foods. Now, you can't eat octopus, but you can eat certain other types of food that have to be certain other types of cuisine. And they expect that to be, they want that to be, they're looking for a kosher version of that world cuisine, but there aren't that many of them. So if you find a company that's making a specific type of food for the kosher market, they're not going to be able to sell that many. So that means their price point is it's just going to cost more. Um, so it is going to cost more when you go to a kosher store. There are going to be specialty foods that are going to cost more. Cheese is going to cost more because, as I said, the process of making kosher cheese is just the conservative movement may be okay with just regular cheese, but people who are stricter in their kosher observance will not be, and they will. So therefore, they're going to have to. They're going to demand higher strictness with the kosher foods. So kosher cheese is going to be more expensive. Obviously, kosher meat. um, but on the other hand, thank God for the kosher agencies out there, because they've been so involved in going out to the food industry that you can find kosher food products everywhere. Now, not everything do you need a hechsher on either. Even the Orthodox Union, which is the largest kosher supervision agency in the world, they will say certain things like canned vegetables. There's no need for you to have a hechsher on canned vegetables. If it's the vegetable in water, not a problem. If it's canned fruit in water or the juices of the fruit, not a problem. So there's a lot of things that you don't even need a hechsher with. It's basically just what's the word I'm looking for? Processed. It's basically processed foods is the issue. Highly processed foods. Um, One more thing I want to say about the what people do and don't eat. There is such thing as kosher veal, but there's lots of people, and I'm talking about lots of kosher consumers, who will not eat veal because of the way veal is produced. So I mean, even people who eat meat won't eat veal because to get the to get the softness of the meat, what they do is they basically don't allow the animal to move. They have the calf, it just kind of sits there because they don't want it to develop its muscle structure. So many people consider that cruel. And I should have said, oh gosh, one of the important rules about kashrut is a mitzvah called Sa'ar Ba'alei Chayim, torturing animals. We are not allowed, from the time of Noah, that's one of the rules that Noah was given, and certainly the Torah for Jews, you can't treat animals cruelly, which, going back to what I was saying before about this kosher meat packing place in Postville, Iowa, many kosher consumers stopped eating their products because they insisted, and many rabbis, Orthodox rabbis, declared that the way they treated the animals, let alone the immigrant workers, but the way they treated the animals was breaking the rule of Tsa'ar Ba'alei Chayim. They were torturing the animals the way they were slaughtering them. I mean, even though the slaughter itself may have been kosher, they would to make it easier for the slaughter. One of the methods they used was the hoist method. They would hoist the animal upside down, which would, of course, terrorize it. And then it made it easier for the slaughterer to get in and cut the part that needed to be cut. And that was considered by many kosher consumers and rabbis to be Sa'ar Ba'alei Chayim, torturing, causing suffering to the animal. So that was an ethical reason why, even though the ritual was kosher, the producing it was unethical, and so it was considered to be non-kosher. So, okay, so this is the opening, the introduction to Kashrut. There's a lot of stuff here. That's why I really encourage people to go through the book and to read through the various portions, why Kashrut, some of the details about Kashrut. Next week, we'll do a little bit more in depth on this. And the third week, we'll talk about, well, what if you want to kasher your house? What do you need to do? So we'll talk about that. Now, if you will give me a moment, just another 15 minutes, I promised I would do this, which is to call up the screen again and just do a few more letters in Hebrew. So if you're willing to stick around, we can do this. Last time we got all the way down to, I know we did Gimel, which has a gap in it. Gimel, and we did U. All right, so now we're going to get, this week, we're going to do 3 new vowels, and these are what are called short vowels. Notice we've learned each of these vowels. If you ignore the 2 dots, well, actually there's four vowels here. The 2 dots are silent. The vowel underneath the aleph is a. The vowel underneath the hey letter, the one that looks like a T, is also, we pronounce it a. And the one that looks like 3 little dots, 3 like eggs, remember it's pronounced eh, like an egg. These 3 vowels are, when they are combined, they are sometimes combined with the silent vowel, and they're referred to as short vowels. For the straight line with the 2 dots next to it, which is underneath the aleph, and the 3 dots, the eh vowel with the 2 dots next to it, they stay the same. Doesn't matter whether you got the 2 dots with the ah vowel sound or just the ah vowel sound. Doesn't matter if you've got the eh vowel sound with just with the 2 dots, the silent vowel, it's still eh. It's always eh. However, the little T vowel, when it gets next to the 2 dots, it's pronounced O. So there's a little more confusion for you. But this one is an O sound. So going through line 1, let me pull this up a little bigger. Ooh, good. All right. So line 1 is ah, ha, ah, and now it's O, ho, O, because aleph and ayin are silent, And then finally it's ha, eh. So line 2, we've got avi, hadar, right? No change. Doesn't matter that this got the silent vowel next to it. It's pronounced hadar. Ali. Ah, but here it does change. Aholi. Ma omad. Elil. He elil. And line 3 is ma riv, vim. But here's the change. Ho lay, dom, he vid, avadim. There's remember the Dalet has the dent in it. That's how you know it's different from right here in the first word, ma'ariv, the resh is rounded. The Dalet is dented. And here's the final mem, only comes at the end of the word. All right. And this is probably the reason why we're learning this right now, because it's a little advanced, these vowels. They don't show up very often, but they want you to get comfortable reading the word El, which is God, and Elohim, so that you know what this vowel is for Elohim. If you're looking in a prayer book, Elohim's going to be there all the time. So they want you to be familiar with that. Okay, here's line 5. Elohim Borei. Again, remember the ball is in the b, makes it a b. Borei Ha'olam. Line 6 is Hu, Aleph is silent, Hu Elohei Ha'amim. And again, a reminder that when the dot's in the middle of a word, it only makes a change if we say so. Here it doesn't make a change. Without the dot, with the dot, it's still m. Only here in line 7, because of the ball in there, does it change the sound. If we took it out, it would have a void and it would be v. But here it's b. Elohim borei ha'adam. God created or creates man, or creator of man, okay? Hu Eli, hu vorei. Here's that void. So here it's a v. Vorei. And number 9, Elohim borei ha-or. Line 10 is Hu Elohei Olam. And again, a reminder that the O vowel sound can also be the straight line with a dot, or just the dot above the word. Sometimes there's no straight line. All right, here's 11. Me'olam ad olam. See that a lot in the prayer book. Here's Avraham. We've been reading about him the last couple weeks in the Torah service. Avraham Eved Elohim. And here we go, number 13. Hu Elohei Avraham. And 14 is Ha'el Hagadol Hagibor. Notice once again, here you got the gimel with a dot in it, doesn't make any difference, but the bet makes a difference. And finally, 15, Hodu Lo. Give thanks to God. Now, here notice we've got this straight line. A dot on the top is O, a dot in the middle is U, and the way you remember is when you get hit on the top of the head, you go, oh. When you get hit in the stomach, you go, ooh. All right. And in this little box, we have Elohim li lo ira. God is with me. Lo ira, I shall not fear. That's also a phrase we see in scripture as well as in prayer books. All right, one new letter, and then we'll call it a night. This is the last letter in the alphabet. Tav, like because it's got a toe there. You see, it's a little toe. Because the chet, we haven't had chet yet. Never mind. We'll get to it. Got a little toe. So that's how you remember this is a toe. And it's got a dot in the middle, which makes a difference to certain dialects like Ashkenazic, but the way we're learning it, it's not going to make a difference whether there's a dot in there or not. But we'll get to that letter in a moment, or next week. So number one, ta, t. Sometimes the e vowel sound is a helper, that letter right there. Ta, to, te. Line 2. To, tu, ti, tu, to, ti, te. Okay. Here's line 3. To, da, do, di. To, da, do, da. And here's line 4. I'm putting together another word. Talmud, Torah, Tal, Mi, Di. And again, here's that L sound. That's the longest letter. It's longer than all the other letters, so it's L. Okay. Line 5. Meir, Lomed, Torah. There's the word Torah. Meir, Talmid. Who Lomed Torah. And here's Devorah Talmida. He lamda Torah. Meir, that's a person's name. Meir, it's a guy's name actually. Meir Lomed Torah ba Talmud Torah. 9 is Gam Devorah Lamda Torah ba Talmud Torah. And here are some phrases. Atahu ha Elohim. There, that short vowel with the S sound. Hu Atahu Elohim. Atahu Elohei Avraham. You are the God of Abraham. And Elohim Gadalta Me'od. God, you are very great. And here's in the box we have Torah Ora. Nice little rhyming there. Torah is light. Or is light. Torah Ora. Now, what they did in this passage was Talmid and Talmidah. Once again, the distinction between feminine and masculine in Hebrew. So a Talmid is a masculine student. Talmidah is a feminine. It's feminine. Okay. And while we're not going to, we'll save this for next week. But you see here, Sephardic, which is the pronunciation. Actually, we're learning modern Israeli pronunciation. It's not exactly Sephardic, but it's a combination of Ashkenazic and Sephardic. But the Sephardic way of pronouncing this letter, whether it's got a dot in it or not, is t. To. The Ashkenazim pronounce it as an S. S. And and that explains, if you're sometimes confused, some people say Shabbat Shalom and some people say Good Shabbos. Well, why you pronounce it two different ways? Well, Good Shabbos is a Yiddish phrase, Yiddish Ashkenazic. There, the last letter in the word Shabbat is this letter without the dot in it. So Ashkenazic Jew pronounce it Shabbos, and the Sephardic pronunciation is Shabbat. Also notice that the emphasis is in different places. Ashkenazic, it's always on the penultimate. Shabbos, right? Shabbos. Yeah, Shabbos. And in Sephardic, it's always on the last syllable, Shabbat. Okay. All right, that's enough for tonight. And so we'll pick it up next week, and we'll pick up more stuff on Kashrut. Okay. Blair and Cyrus, I hope you guys are doing better health-wise.
Yeah, I actually go to the doctor on Wednesday, so things are. I'm coming to morning mignon with Sylvia on Thursday. So
Oh, good.
yeah.
Okay. Very good. We'll see you then. All
Yep.
right. Everybody have a good night. Take care.
Thank you, Rabbi. Have a good night,
Thank you.
everyone.
Shavua Tov.
Voto.
Good night.
Night.